And people are starting to come in.
And it's asking me, this meeting has been recorded. Do I consent?
Yes.
So I'll just say continue.
Just continue. Yeah. And
all right.
Yes. And so welcome everyone to this session on facilitating engaging online discussions. We are so thankful to have Ekaterina Stoops to present for us this afternoon. My name is Anna Thompson. I am from University of Washington, Bothell. I will be moderating this session this afternoon. And as a reminder, please stay muted and with your cameras off throughout the session. And in regards to questions, please feel free to post them on the chat. I will be moderating the chat and we'll save all the questions for the end. And without further ado, here's Ekaterina.
Yeah, thank you so much. And everyone, thank you for joining me today. And I am very excited to be here and to be sharing this the strategies about facilitating online discussions and tips and tricks with all of you. So really excited, and it will be fun 15 minutes. So at the end, I plan to have a Q&A so that we could address the questions that you will have. So, and as I'm presenting, like what Anna said, just feel free to post your questions in the chat and we will address them at the end. So the topic of my presentation today is facilitating engaging online discussions. And I will be sharing some strategies that are based on instructional design best practices and online learning and teaching best practices. A little bit about from my experience teaching online and also facilitating training programs. I also prepared a list of resources and articles that I'm using for this presentation, and the links to those resources, and I will be referencing them as we go over the strategies. So, but the links to these resources and articles, I listed them at the end of the slide deck. So if you're interested in getting the slide deck, so you can just email me and I will email you with the PowerPoint presentation. So just a little bit about me. My name is Ekaterina Stoops, and I am the Director for Teaching and Learning, and I'm also an instructional designer, and I work at Columbia Basin College. It's a college in Washington State in Pasco. So let's get started. Something about my slides, they're not moving. Having a hard time progressing with my slides.
You want to stop the share and reshare and see if that and test it out?
Yeah, it's sometimes it's kind of like gets stuck. I don't know. Sometimes it works fine and sometimes it just gets stuck. I apologize for that. I just couldn't figure out how to move to the next slide. But we're here, and I would like to start this presentation with a little bit of maybe what students say about online discussions versus what they say about discussions in face-to-face classes. So I've been facilitating, I've been developing classes and curricula for many, many years, and I've been teaching online and in person, also hybrid classes for many years. And I work with faculty who design curricula for online and in person. And it's interesting that I kind of see some differences in how students respond to discussions that are facilitated in class versus how students feel about discussions that are facilitated online. And again, this is just based on my experience teaching and designing classes and also my conversations with the faculty who teach online and in person. But what I noticed is that in class, in face-to-face classes, many students, well, I would say a majority of students really love those collaborative activities. They like group projects, they like discussions, anything that is collaborative, they tend to really like. But when it comes to online, it's interesting that they may have kind of a mixed reaction. So, and again, I'm just sharing my experience working with faculty and working with the students. But sometimes what we hear from students is that they perceive online discussions in online classes specifically as a waste of time. Also, sometimes I hear that, well, discussions don't really count toward a final grade. Therefore, I don't really take it seriously. And especially it happens, especially if when you design discussion board activities and you design them as not graded, then students tend to not take discussions very seriously. Also, another kind of common feedback I hear from students is that they feel like, because usually in online classes, there is this heavy emphasis on writing or written communication. They feel like they have nothing else to contribute, especially if they're submitting their posts and responses closer to the due date. And they feel like, my peers have already said everything that I wanted to say. There's really nothing else I can add. That's also kind of a common comment from the students I hear. Also, another common feedback from the students is my instructor is not participating, so why should I bother? So that tells me that there is this expectation. Students expect the instructor to be present and they expect the instructor to be moderating and participating in discussions. And when that doesn't happen, they tend to be very disappointed. So the reason why I started with this challenges is because hopefully through my presentation, I'm going to address these common concerns, comments from the students. So I want to address these challenges. And I divided up my presentation into two parts. So the first part is about different examples, different discussion prompts, different types of discussion activities that can create that engagement, collaborative spirit in your online classes. That's really the reason why I kind of decided to do this presentation. I was thinking about different topics for my presentation, and I chose this one, facilitating effective discussions, because in online classes, this engagement, collaboration, working together, building a community, building a relationship online is really, really important. And these are the types of questions that I like from faculty, and this is really my area of expertise, burden engagement and collaboration online. So the first part of my presentation is going to be all about different examples of discussion prompts, discussion style activities that create that engagement. And in the second part, I will address a little bit about how to start developing your course, how to set expectations, how to build community online, and how to moderate and model communication online. So kind of two parts in this presentation. So let's jump into some examples. And I just wanted to, again, mention that I kind of used a lot of articles and different research to prepare for this presentation, to find some examples for you. And all of them, all the links are listed on the last slide. And you can email me and I will respond with this presentation PowerPoint deck. So the first example that I wanted to share with you is case studies. So case studies is really an excellent discussion prompt that you can incorporate in your classes. So case studies they really encourage students to apply critical thinking. They also allow for unique, very thoughtful answers and a variety of different answers. So in the first slide, remember when there was one comment from the students, I have nothing else to say. I feel like all my peers have already said everything. That happens a lot when questions for discussion board activities, I kind of, I would say, don't go very deep. They're kind of black and white, and there's only so much you can say. And if there are 30 students in your class, then of course answers would be very repetitive. By incorporating case studies, and I will read this example out loud for all of us. By incorporating case studies, number one, you bring this engagement. You also bring it's considered real life examples from the industries, and students really like that when there is a connection between their coursework and the industry and the trends, and they really like to study them. So in this case study, it's from the article Online Discussion Questions That Work. I really like that example. And so I'm going to read it out for all of us. A 72-year-old man is admitted to the hospital for a kidney transplant. His daughter is brought in as the best available match as a donor. As the man's doctor, you discover from the lab work that the daughter is not a suitable donor because she's not his biological daughter. What if anything do you tell the man, his wife, or the daughter? So it's just an example. I'm not sure which course it is, maybe ethics course, but the point is, I think it can generate a really interesting dynamic and engaging discussion among students, this type of case studies. So it allows for a variety of really interesting and unique perspectives. It's not you kind of black and white type scenario. So another example, kind of similar to case studies, they all fall under the category of real life examples and scenarios that is important to bring into your coursework. So it's called controversy, and also from this example is from the article Online Discussion Questions That Work. So I'll read it out to you. A fundamental tenet of information security is that you must force the users to periodically change his or her password. But this practice actually undermines security. With constantly changing passwords, users are forced to write them down in an easy to find location. We're better off letting users keep the same password indefinitely. Do you agree? Again, it's probably a cybersecurity course. I'm not familiar with cybersecurity much as just a user, but even I, with my limited knowledge about cybersecurity, could say something. I have my opinion about this controversial case study. And by bringing case studies, controversies, real life examples, scenarios, you allow your students to engage in something that is happening in your industries. They understand the trends and they understand what's going on in real life. So you make that connection, and so it creates motivation and engagement. And when I talk about case studies, real life examples, I always get a question about how to find or where to find case studies, because writing case studies like this, bringing those real life examples from the industry, can be time consuming. So I always get this question, is there some kind of repository where I can go as a faculty and just find those examples? And my answer is always, maybe there is such a repository. I would encourage you maybe to connect with your librarians. When I talked to our librarians, they said that they, in our institution, they help faculty find different examples. So they provide this support. So I'm sure it's the same on your campus. But my recommendation to all of us will be to create our own case studies, write our own case studies. And here is why. I always write my own examples for my training courses. My area of expertise is adult education, instructional design, learning and development, and I consider myself a subject matter expert in these disciplines. I also constantly keep up with the current trends in the industry. I'm connected to professionals who have similar roles at other institutions. I'm connected to them on LinkedIn. I'm always reading what they post. My point is, it's easy for me to bring my own examples and write my own case studies because I am keeping up to date with the trends. And you also, all of you are subject matter experts in your industry, in your discipline. So you could do the same. You could write your own case studies, your own examples. Or maybe another recommendation could be to partner with somebody at your department, your program, and work together, other faculty members who teach similar disciplines, and you can create a repository of your own case studies and kind of exchange them. In this way, you're not the only one writing them, because it could be a time-consuming process. But students love those real-life examples from the industry, and they'll like to solve those cases. So these two examples could be really good for discussion, as discussion prompts for discussion activities in your online courses. So I have other examples, and these examples fall under the category of reports and research. So I see that chat is buzzing, so 10 posts. I don't see the comments, so I'm going to address them at the end. But I'm very excited to see what you're posting. So these examples fall under the category of reports and research. And again, they work really well for discussion board activities, for discussions in your online classes. So again, several highlights, several examples from those articles that I found, and also from my own experience teaching online and developing courses, online courses. So the first one is web field trip. And there are just so many ways how you can set it up online, but it's just one example that I have for you. Instructor provides a link or a series of links. Students follow those links and then report back through an instructor-defined set of questions. Then students review 2 or 3 responses posted by their peers, and they comment. So there are 2 things here that I want to highlight. So the first kind of part of this assignment is students are involved in research. So yes, instructor can provide the links, or students can look for those for their own links, so they can do their own research. And the second part is peer review. So, and peer reviews is an excellent way to engage students online. It's that critical thinking, problem solving, and evaluation. It's a really powerful strategy for online classes. So the way you would do peer reviews here, you would, if you teach in Canvas or Blackboard, the peer reviews options for you could choose, and you could assign, for example, 2 people. So Ekaterina could do a peer review for John, and you could set it up. I'm thinking about Canvas because I just did it a couple of days ago, set up peer review. So it's really easy to do in Canvas using the peer review feature on the discussion board. It's really easy. But the key is with peer reviews to make it really successful, because they can actually go, they can be frustrating for the students and faculty, and I've seen that. And I think the reason why peer reviews may not work is because instructors don't provide a rubric for students. So when you're asking students to evaluate their peers' work, and it's a peer review style activity, it's important to incorporate a rubric that would allow a student, like with a very specific set of guidelines and criteria, that would allow students to know what is it that they're doing as they're evaluating and reviewing their peers' work. And that's really the key to success. So this is how you could set it up in your course. Another example is discussions of course readings. And here you can say, well, what's new here? Everyone is doing discussions around course readings. And here is kind of my spin and take on a very common strategy, common type of activity. So instructor, here's an example. Instructor sets up discussions around assigned readings. But the trick here is to separate questions into pre-reading that could be anticipation style questions, and post-reading, which is evaluation and application style questions. Let's just say this is this presentation, the one that I am doing live right now. Let's just imagine I am doing this kind of lesson asynchronously online. So what I would do, I would set up a discussion board activity and I would post a question, and I could say something. What would your students say about online discussions in your course? Please reflect. So you would post your comments on the discussion board. Then I would post a recording of this. Well, it's a lecture since I'm the only one talking, so it is a lecture. I would record it and I would post on the discussion board, and I would ask all of you to watch it, to watch the recording. And then after that, I would post a second question. How would you make your discussions more engaging? Share 2 or 3 examples with your colleagues, and that would be that post reading type question, and you would comment. So I've noticed I've done discussions when I didn't do this 2 types of questions, pre-reading and post-reading. And I've done discussions where I would do that setup with pre-reading and post-reading. And every time I do that, I am amazed how well the quality of student responses is just so different. And just by doing this simple trick, pre-reading and post-reading, you could drastically change the quality of interactions, and engagement is much higher, and students are just much more, that their responses are so rich and deep. And if you want to take it to the next level, you could even, like with the second question, how would you make your discussions more engaging? What I could do, share 2 examples with your colleagues. I could give you a choice of how to submit your responses. I could say something. For this discussion activity, you could choose to record your answers as a video recording and submit it on this discussion board, or as an audio podcast, or in writing. So if you're using Canvas, it's so easy to do that video recording thing in Canvas, and also an audio podcast. If you're using Blackboard, I'm sure that you have some kind of video platform integrated into Blackboard, and you could use that for recordings. But the point is, just by diversifying submission formats, by giving your students a choice how they would submit their answers as recordings, video recordings, audio recordings, or in writing, you can also boost that engagement and bring some excitement and creativity. 2 other examples that also under this category of reports and research are research bank and observations and experiments. Also, they work so well in online courses, and I would just use them for this as discussion prompts for discussion board activities. So many instructors do use this research banks, for example, observations and experiments in their online courses, these types of prompts. But what I see is that they would set them up as assignments. And assignments are, that's great, but the limitation that is that students don't see what their peers are posting. By using a discussion board in your LMS, so you kind of open it up for your whole class to see what other students are sharing and what they're discussing. So just by switching from assignments to discussions in your LMS, you can boost that engagement. So for research bank, for example, you as students and instructor contribute links and citations to a common area of research. So it's kind of a traditional research style. For observations and experiments, you can ask students observe or participate in an experiment, for example, outside of the class, and then report back with the observations and findings. Here, you could also do peer review piece, where once they submit the reports. They can peer review each other's submissions. But again, I just want to highlight it again. If you do decide to do peer reviews, make sure that you have a rubric that the student can use as their peer reviewing their peers' work. That's really the key. And also, you could ask students to submit their reports in writing, or it could be some sort of like, they could use an infograph. There are just all kinds of free software that are really easy to use nowadays. They could use audio, video recordings. Again, just think about the ways to kind of diversify the delivery and submission formats to make it very interesting. I like infographics. I really like them. I like to use them. They're so easy and there are so many free tools. You don't even have to pay. So you can encourage your students to use those for submissions. Other examples of discussion prompts that work really well in online classes. They actually work in all modalities, in person, hybrid, and online. But I really do want to focus on online delivery in this presentation. So they fall under the category of group activities. And I just prepared several examples from you. Again, some of them are taken from those articles and research that I mentioned in the beginning. The links are at the end of the slide deck, and some of them are from my experience designing and facilitating online classes. So group brainstorming. So for example, you could ask your students to work in small groups, no more than 5 people per group, to brainstorm ideas on a given topic without evaluation. The way you would set it up, instructor sets up several shared documents. For example, Google Docs. You can use Google or any other tool that is available to you to allow students to brainstorm asynchronously. Or you could set up several Zoom links or whatever video conferencing platform you're using at your school. You can set it up for each group, give them each group a link to either a shared document or to a Zoom, or maybe both, and give each group can decide how they want to brainstorm. They can do it asynchronously. They can get together on Zoom and brainstorm that way. So each group could decide how they want to do that. And then they put together, each group would put together a group report, any product that you want them to put together. And then they would post that thing, product, report, paper, something, research, on the general discussion board in your class. And they can even do peer reviews. Each group can peer review other groups' reports and submissions. So that's one way to facilitate it. And for this example, you don't even have to set up break groups in every LMS. You have an option to actually create groups. For this example, you don't even have to do that, because setting up groups in your course, it requires some work. This is just, you can use any general discussion board to set this up for your students. A group analysis works the same way as group brainstorming, but here students are not brainstorming, they're kind of analyzing. Students work in small groups on a common case. Then each group would submit the reports, their work, for a larger group to critique, to review, to evaluate on the discussion board. And to make it interesting, each group can have a different question that they're analyzing, or a different task that they're working on. So this way, when they come back to this main discussion board, and when they are evaluating or critiquing their work, they're all looking at different questions, because each group had a different question they were analyzing or reviewing, or different task. Collaborative writing, I've done that a lot in writing intensive courses. For example, writing essays. Instead of asking students to write an essay, you can ask students to work in groups and write a collaborative essay. So maybe 2-3 students per group, and they can write something together using a Google Doc asynchronous, or they can meet on Zoom. You can give them a choice, and then they would post on the discussion board. And of course, something that I think we all do, just because we teach online doesn't mean that we can't meet synchronously via Zoom or any virtual platform that we use at our schools. So students can do group presentations, live debates, live discussions. Um, of course, you need to be careful because there's a reason why students are taking classes online. Maybe they can't meet at the same time on Zoom for live discussion. So, but I think it just would depend on your group of students and whether it would work for them. But it's always fun to have live sessions in your online classes. And now I'm jumping into the second part of my presentation. And for the second part, I want to focus on other aspects of what contributes to engagement and how to create that collaborative spirit in your online classes. So examples of those collaborative activities like group projects and case studies and research style activities. Let's just say you spend all this time developing case studies and you have all this wonderful prompts, but once you start facilitating your class, you can still feel that just, the engagement is not very high. Students are not really super motivated to share and exchange ideas. And you may be wondering why, because, you spend so much time working on the discussion prompts and you still feel that the engagement, students are not really engaged. So could be other reasons. And I want to dive into this other reasons. Preparation. So preparation is really important. So we instructional designers, we kind of like to emphasize that it's important to design your course fully designed from start to finish before you start teaching the course. That's kind of an ideal scenario. So the course is fully designed before the beginning of the quarter, before the beginning of your term. But in reality, it's really hard to achieve, especially if this is a new course you're teaching. And usually what happens, you may have like several modules designed, but then you are designing the rest of your class as you are teaching the class. So, but as you are designing your class, it's really important to kind of have some questions for yourself as you are you need to have those questions in mind as you are designing your course. And the questions that I like to ask myself every time I design some kind of training or a course, anything. So these are my questions that I like to have for myself. So how many discussions do I want to plan in my training or in my course? Is it going to be every week? Is it going to be bi-weekly? Is it going to, how often? So that is important to me to ask as I'm designing my training, for example. Also, as I'm thinking about how often, I also like to think about what types of discussion prompts I want to have each week. For example, 1 week, week one, it could be just a general traditional discussion board where everyone is submitting things in writing. Week two, I could have some kind of research project for the students or for participants in my training course. For week, I don't know, 5, I could have a bigger group project that definitely requires more work for students and for you as a facilitator of your course. So, and maybe if I want to incorporate a group project, maybe I could as I'm thinking about it, as I'm designing your course, I would actually want to set up groups in my LMS. So, but having those questions in mind helps me understand what tools I want to incorporate in my course. Do I want to do groups set up in my LMS, or just want to do general discussion boards? How often? Maybe the different types of tools I want to bring. So this is all important as I'm designing. Another question that I like to ask myself, or keep in mind as I am designing online experiences, is how would my students, how each discussion that I am implementing in my modules is going to help my students achieve my course learning outcomes. Because one of the typical comments that I hear from the students, that sometimes they get confused about why they've been asked to participate in discussions. They don't understand the connection between a discussion board activity that they're asked to complete and the course learning outcomes. Sometimes they perceive discussions as a waste of time. So by making this connection very clear to your students, you're going to address this issue. And I have a template for you here.
Ekaterina,
15 minutes?
15. Yes.
Oh my gosh. All right. So, and this template, I did not design this template. I borrowed it. We all do that. So it's a wonderful team, e-learning team at Renton Technical College. So they designed this template and they're using them in their course, this template in their courses. I saw it and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just so cool. And I'm using it for my presentations now. So thank you, Renton Technical College. Thank you, RTC e-learning team. So basically what I like about this template, it has these sections: purpose, outcomes. Let's focus on the first two. So you can in each discussion activity, you can state, it's important to state the purpose. The purpose of this discussion is, and you complete the sentence. Also connecting this specific discussion board with the outcome in your, or maybe two in your course, is also kind of making sure that students understand the connection between why they're doing this activity and how it's going to help them learn what they're supposed to be learning in their course. So that's that. And also this other separating initial post and the follow-up is something that is also very, very important. Basically, you probably all have encountered this situation where, say, let's just say a discussion board activity is due on Wednesday at 11 p.m. So you're waiting, you are sending all these announcements and reminders to your students saying, make sure you submit by the due date. And they, like 50 or maybe 70% of your students submit their posts at 10 p.m. like 1 hour before the due date on Wednesday. So what happens in this situation, that they don't have time for this follow-up, for this peer reviews or exchange of ideas. So everyone submits almost at the last minute, and there is no time left for this large class discussion. So by separating, by having two due dates, you're going to mitigate this problem. So for example, the first due date for the initial post can be the end of say 11 p.m. on Monday. So that's where everyone submits the initial original post. And then you can say that the follow-up, all this peer reviews and stuff, it will be due at 11 p.m. on Wednesday. So it gives students 2 days to exchange in a discussion. So I've done that, and I noticed there is a huge difference in the quality of the submissions and quality of the discussion just by separating, by having two due dates. And the last section is tips for success. This is really something that I never really thought about before I saw this template. And then I'm like, wow, this is brilliant. You may have some very complex prompts, like, one of those where there's group work involved or research, and you may want to include some specific tips for success so that students can better understand your requirements and expectations for this particular assignment. Just adding extra support and making sure that students are well supported. So I think I'm going to skip a couple of slides, but I really want to focus on this one. And I'm going to probably skip two, because I do want to make sure that I have time to address the questions that you have in the chat. So another reason why sometimes discussions kind of don't go very well and there is low engagement, and students are not very actively engaged. It could be simply because students don't understand the expectations. And as we're teaching our courses, we as faculty, we think that, well, of course, students know what we expect, but students really don't, because they may be taking multiple different courses, and every instructor has a different way of grading, what they expect from, like, in terms of communication, professionalism. So every faculty member can have different set of expectations, and students can't read our mind. So it's important in online classes, especially, it is really important to make sure the students know what is expected of them. So using rubrics for discussion board activities, making discussion board activities graded, because if you're asking students to do any work, that work needs to be graded. Incorporating rubrics helps them understand how they can meet the requirements, how they can get a good grade, how you're grading their work. Also, adding other types of expectations like norms and like etiquette is communication norms and expectations. In the beginning of the quarter, it is really important to spend that time building that community with your students. Beginning of the term, the first week of your class, you could, for example, have, work with your students together, and you can come up with a set of guidelines for communication, for professionalism, how, other types of aspect. If you're using Zoom and live sessions, there could be some guidelines around that. Or you could just simply post a document with your syllabus before, and ask students to review those documents, even set up a quick quiz so that they actually review those documents, and make it maybe adaptive release. So before students can start your first module, they need to complete that quiz, just to make sure that students review the syllabus, review the etiquette, and they know your expectations ahead of time. So that is important. And one last slide is building a community. So just very briefly, another reason why students may not be fully engaged in online classes is because they don't feel that there is a community. So in physical, like in face-to-face classes, it's easier to build, for all of us to build relationship and build that community, because when we come on campus and we're in the same physical space, it just happens naturally. So we start talking to each other, we kind of develop in, if we come to class again and again and again, we start developing those relationships. It just kind of happens naturally. In online environment, it doesn't happen naturally. Instructors, faculty really need to incorporate strategies, and I feel like can do a separate workshop just focusing on how to build community in online classes. But you need to actually do extra work to ensure that there is this community spirit in your class. And there's so many strategies how you could do that, but just a few that I wanted to share. In the beginning of your class, so the first week of your class, that's really crucial time for community building. So make sure that you give students an opportunity to introduce themselves. You need to also introduce yourself, because your students would want to know who you are as a person. Do maybe a video announcement where you talk about why you like teaching this course, maybe a little bit about your hobbies. Set up an introduce yourself discussion forum where students can talk about their hobbies and why they're taking this class, and share something else. I also like to start my training with Zoom sessions. And again, Zoom could be any other video conferencing platform, because I feel like, meeting with people in this live setting, it helps build community. But I know that not everybody could make it to a live session, so I just usually record and then post the recording. And I also make sure that they have an opportunity for everyone in my training courses to introduce themselves. So video announcements, I already mentioned, very important. I like to do one video announcement a week. It's a short 3 minutes, but I talk about things that are happening each week, and I like video format. And virtual office hours, of course, is always very, very important. Just making sure that you have that schedule posted and you're available for your students. But there are so many more strategies that focus on how to build the community. But if you have that community spirit in your online class, where students know who you, their instructor, they have an opportunity to connect with each other, so that can create that psychological safety where they feel much more comfortable sharing their ideas on the discussion boards, sharing their perspectives, sharing their insights and anything that they want to share. So, and as I mentioned, I have a few slides that I skipped, and also at the end of the slide deck, I have resources that I used for this presentation. You can always email me. I'll post my email in the chat. And now I really do want to do the discussion Q&A. Your opportunity, it's not really that much time left. So I'll stop sharing so that we could do the discussion.
Yes, thank you, thank you. So we had quite a few comments. We had a lot of activity in the chat. So some of the comments from Karen Ritchie, how people have participated in the same type of discussion that we're familiar with, right? And then they wanted a better approach. And she shared an example she saw once when instructor writes the first prompt, a student replies, then asks a new question or prompt for more info. Then one replies to that one, and so on.
Yes, absolutely. So it's kind of like, so each student has a different prompt that they're replying to, where they're coming up with their own prompts.
Oh, so they're replying to the same prompt, but they respond with their post and a question.
That's excellent. That's wonderful. I'm going to include it in my next presentation on this topic, if I can borrow your strategy.
Yeah.
Your permission.
And then Jennifer Morrison, she said that Darby and Lang have good suggestions in their book for engaging discussions.
Perfect. And there's a link to the book. Oh yeah. Okay.
And then Joni Dunlap, she made quite a few comments. She said maybe have students create case studies, sort of like writing a good question, making a good vignette, demonstrating they understand the issues and opportunities in a particular problem of practice.
I love that, having students write their case studies. I never really even thought about it. That is excellent. Please, do I have your permission to include this tip into my next presentation? I'll keep doing this presentation for different audiences. I want to steal it if I have your permission.
I mean, just all the things that you share, and then these other ideas are wonderful too. It's like, wow.
This is cool, having students. Okay, I'll remember
so
that.
then Joni also shared another strategy that has worked for her is that to let students know in advance what she's going to ask them, and ask 3 questions at the end of the discussion. What were the main points of the discussion? What was the most significant contribution to discussion? And why was that contribution significant? And she found that those strategies really help. And
yeah, it's kind of like a metacognition. So you kind of ask students to reflect. I like that.
And we have a couple of questions here. One from Roberta. She asked, will you be showing some examples of your peer review rubrics?
Oh, well, I could, but I ran out of time. I ran out of time. So, well, if you'd like to connect with me via email, you are welcome to do that. I'll post my email. I could definitely share what I have with you. But for peer reviews, basically, the idea for peer reviews is you as an instructor. So it will depend on your prompt. on what is it that you want your students to do. So, but basically, make sure that you spell out your expectations for what exactly do you want students to focus on as they're peer reviewing their peers' work. For example, when you don't have this rubric, students can focus on things that are completely irrelevant. Like if you're teaching a cybersecurity course, some students may be peer reviewing somebody's grammar. And that could be important for English courses, but not for a cybersecurity course. Maybe you care less about your students making grammatical mistakes, yet that student focuses on that, but not the cybersecurity thing that they want them to focus on. See what I'm saying? It's really, it kind of depends on your course, on your expectations, on your prompt. But for peer reviews, you need to tell your students in that rubric, what is it that you want them to focus on as their peer review? Do you want them to focus on grammar? Do you want them to focus on evaluating a piece of code that their peer created? Do you want them to focus on their professionalism, like communication style? It could be important for multicultural communication, for any type of communication courses. It's kind of like very subjective, and that's why I said depends on the course and a particular prompt. Like for research style, do you want students to evaluate if somebody did proper citations, like APA kind of thing? So do you want them to focus on that as their peer reviewing? I don't know if I answered the question. I hope I did. I'll quickly post my email so that if you're interested, you could reach out to me. And I feel like we ran out of time.
Yeah, we have just one more question
Mhm.
from Henry Moon. He was asking if you place pre-reading and post-reading in the same module, and are you designing using something like an adaptive release?
So yes, that's actually a really good question. And so I like to put everything in one discussion board activity. Like, like in my module 1, at the end I have this discussion board activity, right? So I post, I just, timing is very important for me. So like for example, this discussion board activity is supposed to be due on Wednesday, say next week. So I ask them this pre-reading question. I give them a few days to respond. I say the due date for the initial response is, and I tell them when the due date is. Then for the post-reading question, I give them the second due date. That's how I do it, but there are just so many ways to do it differently. I think it just kind of depends on your class. I do it in one discussion board and I separate due dates. That's what I like to do. It works for me. Columbia.
Yeah, thank you. And it looks like we are a little over time, but
Yeah, so I just posted my, gosh, I hope I spelled Columbia Basin correctly. Well, thank you everyone for joining, for all these questions. I just, as always, I like to put so much in my presentations that there's just not much time left for the discussion, but discussion is really when the magic happens. So thank you so much. Email me if you have any other questions. I would love to get together and talk more about engagement in online classes. Bye. Have fun with
great.
your other presentations and yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Ekaterina, for this wonderful, wonderful presentation and sharing all of your expertise. I learned a lot. So, and I'm going to take this back with me. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have all these links at the end of the slide deck. So if you're interested, I can always respond with the PowerPoint with those slides, because they have links to other research and articles that I used. And those articles are just amazing. They have so many great strategies. It's just amazing what you can find on the internet nowadays. Just wonderful resources.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
Great.
well,
So,
Anna, thank you so much for moderating, helping me. I didn't expect to have so many comments. I was like, oh my gosh, 24. How am I going to go through them?
oh, well, we had 119. That was the highest number at one point.
Oh
So,
my gosh,
attendees.
that is a lot. So, so wonderful. Well, thank you. I'm going to jump to the next session and learn from a speaker who will be talking about also engagement. I like to attend
Yes, excellent.
strategies on engagement.
Thank you.
Well,
Nice,
it's
nice
nice
meeting
to
you.
see you. In my nice meeting you. Yeah, I just I know I've seen your name in emails. Now I know who you are. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Doris. Thank you so much. Yeah, I do have a lot of enthusiasm. I really like this like engagement in all modalities, but online, I feel so passionate about it because sometimes online can feel lonely and students feel like but you can have so much engagement online as well. So I feel very passionate about bringing engagement in online modalities. Bye,
Awesome.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.